Shall we begin?
Certainly.
Okay, so today we will talk about formative assessment in, hopefully in the multiliteracies framework. What I'm going to try to do this semester is to relate what we're doing here a little bit closer to what's being discussed in reading groups, what we are presenting, what is being presented, in fact, during the Friday invited guest speaker seminars. Sort of to try to tie it more better together into this one coherent body of knowledge. We'll cut that out.
Totally. Always him.
Okay, so this is the intro. And let's. We don't need to do any further introductions. This is. It's okay. You're being recorded. It's fine.
Nothing inappropriate, please.
Okay, formative assessments. Let's start with a question, and maybe to you this question is going to look pretty familiar.
Okay, that's okay.
So let's maybe, in your case, we're just going to continue talking about this thing, Jose Antonio. We can start thinking about this question in the context of this particular presentation, this particular workshop. And so the question is, what elements guide your personal instructional decision making in relation to planning student learning outcomes and assessment practices? So maybe not as much focusing on student outcomes, but rather on how do you assess them?
Assess them.
Mm-hmm. Because this workshop is about assessment of sorts.
So the assessment decision making.
So decision making, well, you can't have assessment without knowing what it is, right? Learning outcomes, what it is that you're trying to assess. So these two are intimately related. So we can talk about, it's impossible to talk about one without, talking about the other, and vice versa. So, assessment. What do we assess? How do we assess it? What do we think about?
We most do in assessments. We have a series of exercises in the classroom that allows us to see the students learn what we taught.
Okay.
So that would be through compositions, through quizzes, through exams, through presentations, etc. So that's the way we assess. We assess students.
So we assess students, or do we assess, we assess students, but we also assess what these students are learning, and there's various kinds of activities that we can do with them. Sure. When, and this will be maybe more a question towards Vaini, when do we introduce these assessments? When do we run them?
You mean when in the semester?
When in the semester, when in the class, when in a unit?
Well, I think that especially in lower levels, we're guided by the textbook structure in deciding when we do the assessment. So typically at the end of the chapter, maybe.
Okay, at the end of the chapter.
Like a unit.
Sure.
Yeah, I tend to do it every 2 chapters.
Every 2 chapters.
For quizzes.
Right.
So whenever there's like a natural cutoff point
Yes.
where we do the assessments, do we do any kind of assessments outside of these natural points of demarcation? So sort of maybe during a unit, is there anything like that that we
Not
use?
formal
practice?
assessment, maybe more like informal assessment.
Do all assessments have to be formal?
No.
No. Some of them are for your students, but they're also for you, right? To see how what you're doing.
I think it's one of the things I have learned in one of the workshops that I have attended.
Here?
Here.
Ooh.
He's all ears.
Like the exit ticket, and you learn them what was it they learned on that day.
Okay.
So I haven't done it yet, but that's in my plans to do that, the exit ticket. Or things like I do, which is like music exercises.
Music exercises.
That that they have. In my Portuguese for Spanish speakers, they have a lot of music exercises. And so there is a series of quizzes that are related to the music, and so that's regularly.
So, okay, so we have music exercises. What is it that you're testing? Nope, still got you. Nope, still there.
A lot of editing this
We'll
time.
be famous. No, we're not gonna edit it.
Vocabulary.
Vocabulary, okay. And what about it though?
The understanding the words for the music, certain words that are not, because in general the Portuguese for Spanish speakers, they can associate the Spanish word, but there are certain words that they don't know, so I try to focus on those words. Usually when I choose a song or some type of song, it's going to be
So much editing.
is going to have a topic that we're starting in that unit, which will be like the present indicative or the use of irregular verbs in the present tense or the past tense, etc.
So we're not only looking at the vocabulary, but we're also looking at the grammar, and that would be in the context of
The music.
the music. But what do you want them to be able? Like, why is it important for them to know these grammatical structures? Why is it important for them to know these vocabulary like lexical items? And this question could be to Vain or to.
Hi. What was the question again? I'm so sorry.
This is the question.
It's going to instructional.
We're in the middle of the discussion here, but that's okay. You can jump in.
I think I'm not jumping. Not yet.
Okay.
So, I forgot
why?
to say the question.
The question, okay, because the question is very convoluted as per my usual manner, but essentially what I'm asking you is a very kind of wound up way to, just why? Why are we,
why are we assessing?
vocabulary, why grammar?
Oh,
Well, certainly, in order to learn the language, there are certain structures that are used in the classroom, and so it's a way just to make sure that they are understanding how these structures are used. And usually, most of the structural.
How these structures are used. Okay, so in order for them to be able to understand, but also in order for them to use it, right? Okay, let's maybe move on to, Dara, do you want to add to this? Do you want to add? Okay, let's, is everyone familiar with this? I think Benny should be familiar with it from last time. Is Antonia? What is it, Dara, are you familiar with this?
I think we discussed about this. Remember at the beginning of last term, I showed you my.
Absolutely no recollection of that.
Yeah, and then you told me something about backward curricular design. So basically, what is my goal, and then like step back from there.
Is this how you understand it too? Would you like to elaborate on it?
Well, certainly the traditional way of doing it is you start by saying, okay, so I'm going to teach past tense, and from then you don't know what the goal is, but you start from there. You design your course by saying, okay, so I'm going to teach the conjugations of the past tense for the regular verbs, and I'm going to teach the conjugation for the past tense, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do that, and then in the end I'm going to reach this goal. But I'm going from the structures to the goal. The backward design should be to start from the goal, and then towards the.
So in teaching grammar structures, and this of course is open to everyone, what is the goal?
To them to be able to produce sentences either orally or written in a good organization.
Perfect, yeah. So we're not just teaching for the sake of teaching, right? So the goal would not be, I'm going to teach them grammar, or I'm going to teach them vocabulary. Well, the goal should be rather, they will be able to use this structure, or they will be able to, I don't know, they will be able to give a lecture about Brazilian music by the end of the semester, or speak comprehensively about Dutch painting, for instance, colors, characters, adjectives, and so on and so forth. But we're talking about goals here, yes? So, but there's also objectives. What's the difference?
The objective is the bigger picture, and the goal is the small steps that get you the objective. It's the other way around.
It's the other way around, yeah.
Okay.
But you have there. So
yeah.
goals are the
Okay.
general statements.
That's right, okay.
On which we sort of organize the curriculum, right? So in case of, let's say, Introduction to Indonesian, what is your goal in the class?
To make them speak Indonesian.
But wouldn't that be a goal for like all of them? No. For introductory.
General statement, is it like as detailed as they have to be able to introduce themselves in mass animation?
Okay, yes, that would be a goal. They should be able to introduce themselves.
They have to be able to do speech,
Mhm.
like how speech done in Indonesia, like that.
Okay. I think that's your goal for intermediate Dutch.
Yeah, so what Daru says, but also the cultural appropriateness or inappropriateness of
So the pragmatics.
of certain things, could be even grammar things, grammatical things, or expressions, words.
And then, since this sort of pragmatic cultural proficiency is, or started becoming a goal in intermediate levels, I'm assuming in Brazilian as well, how do we accomplish it?
Each objective or each goal?
Each objective. So if we're talking about cultural proficiency at a certain level, there should be certain, then we should think about the objectives that will lead us or lead our students to the achievement of them.
Okay, so if the goal, for example, in an elementary class, is to be able to write a composition using both the predicate and the imperfect, which are completely different from English, then the objectives would be to learn first the predicate and then learn the imperfect and how they're used in separate ways, and then how you combine them in order to make a narration, because that's the end goal is to be able to narrate in the past using both tenses, which are very completely different for an English speaker.
So the end goal would be to narrate in the past tense, and then we can say the objective would be to be able to produce such a narration in one preterite, and the other goal would be to produce such a narration in the imperfect. Yeah. Laura, do you?
Is it like, let's say my goal is to have them being able to introduce themselves in mass Indonesia, that means the objective is to be able to like pronounce their name correctly, say good morning, hi, my name is.
Okay, so we have the idiomatic knowledge, the pronunciation, we also have some past tense stuff there, because, you know, I was born,
Yeah.
I lived, or I currently live, right? So there's that familiarity too. Okay, so we are getting it. Beautiful. So the first step would be to identify the outcomes, right, and goals. Now the second step in the backward design would be to determine how you will assess that students have met those goals and objectives. So we're talking about introducing themselves, we're talking about cultural familiarity of sorts, right? We're talking about essentially, so right now we're at the point of assessment. There are different types of assessment. What types of assessment are we familiar with?
Traditional written test assessment.
Okay, I'm thinking even more.
Oh, you're just thinking more broadly?
Is it like when it comes to writing, you have to take a look at how the task completed and then the fluency, the vocabulary, and then the aspect?
Those are also, yes, those could also be factors that are dimensions of assessment. Sure. I'm talking. I'm trying to point at this dichotomy here. Right. There's the formative assessment. There's the summative assessment.
The summative would be more quizzes, exams,
Right.
things that have weight in terms of grade. Informative, it's more to see how well they're doing or how much they're learning from class to class, like the expected.
Well, one way too, I mean, there's obviously different ways to interpret that and different ways to apply these. I tend to look at them in terms of, okay, well, summative assessment is something that I would like to use for me as well as for my students, but maybe more so for my students to let them know how they are doing at a certain point in the course, at a point of where there's a natural sort of demarcation between unit chapters, texts that we're working on. Whereas with formative assessment, this is something that I myself, when I was an instructor, I would use that for me and for my own knowledge to see how well they are performing at a given point of time. Because those tend to be not announced. They are sort of pop up. They don't have to be graded. We can certainly grade them, but it doesn't have to be that way. So I tend to look at them in terms of, okay, what's useful more for me and what is useful more for my students. Do you guys do these two kinds of assessments in your classes?
The summatives.
Summatives, okay.
Formative is the one that I want to implement. It's
And wouldn't formative also be when you go over something and you see that students don't understand, that you can change your way of teaching, which would be more for yourself. So you see that what you're saying doesn't work. So that would be informative assessment of yourself more than you do that too, I guess.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that this sort of self-reflective objective for you as an instructor could be, I mean, it's visible through both of these lenses, right? Because you can do it with the summative assessment too. When your students absolutely bomb it at the end of a unit, then you know that something somewhere went terribly wrong. Formative assessment allows you to pinpoint that thing.
More during formative, summative, you can still think, well, they didn't study. But formative, it's right then.
That's right.
Explain it, and you get immediate feedback. You don't get it. So it's more reliable, I would say, as an assessment of your teaching method.
and less stressful for the students.
Is it?
Because I think so, because
You mean summative or
especially for
formative?
Columbia students, because they're
Everything's
so
stressful.
worried. They're so worried with grades.
Uh-huh.
They know the summative is being graded, and the formative is not being graded, so they feel more comfortable making a mistake or showing that they really didn't understand it.
But with formative, you do not get a total picture, every single student. But with summative, you do.
Yeah.
Because you have everybody's work. With formative, it might be like 4 or 5 split up.
Well, there's a way, as we
There's a
shall
way, but
see.
even so, summative would be less subjective than formative.
What do you think, though?
I personally do summative, just because sometimes I cannot remember to do it in a formative way. Is that fair?
That's fair.
Yeah.
We'll have to ask your students.
But I think especially when you do a lot of group work, using the communicative approach, then you have an opportunity to, because you're not listening to only one, but because you're walking around, you get to
Sure, but they see you coming, and it still doesn't give you an what do you call it?
Bird's eye view for the.
Well, it doesn't give you. You just hear snippets, and you're not there long enough, because then you're standing there all nervous, and you do not get exactly. You're not a fly on the wall. It's still difficult.
It is difficult to conduct formative assessment. It is where you have a record that is similar to what you
Yes,
have in
that's what I mean,
assessment. Yeah. Hopefully, what I'm about to show you today will remedy that, because technology has definitely filled that gap. The third step would be to decide what activities you and your students will engage that will lead to meeting the goals and objectives stipulated in point 1. So first we decide, okay, by the end of this unit, by the end of this course, by the end of this segment, we want them to be able to do this, 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 and this, and we do that through goals and objectives that will feed into the goals. Step 2, okay, well, this is how we will assess whether they're able to do all these things or not. And then step 3, well, so these will be sort of the activities that will then lead them to the point where we can assess them. Makes sense? Okay, so backwards. Top down questions. So just review. Pretty straightforward. Okay, but today we're not talking about step 1, we're not talking about step 3, we're talking about step 2, which is effective assessment. There's a quote by a person named Richard Kern. Richard Kern was here in April 2018, so spring last semester. He gave an excellent talk. He talks a lot about the multiliteracies framework, new technologies, and then assessment is also one of the dimensions of his research. He writes that what is evaluated constitutes the de facto curriculum, and how it is evaluated reflects the de facto philosophy of learning and teaching. So regardless of what the teacher or course description says. So everything is sort of feeding into the assessment and is defined by that. But do we have any comments to this comment?
I don't understand.
It's okay,
Regardless of what the teacher says, meaning the teacher says, I'm not assessing students according to, or I'm not assessing the student summatively.
So,
But
okay.
it still is not that. It is not true. It still is what the curriculum says. I don't understand the second part after regardless.
So let's say that you are an instructor who, in his or her teaching philosophy, writes that, well, I teach communicatively.
All right. Okay. Fine.
Right, and
It's
because
not
of that,
reflected in the teaching.
and because of that, at the end of the courses that I conduct, my students are able to have relatively fluent conversations on a limited number of topics. Then, push comes to shove, you are the teacher is in class, teaching, conducting instruction, and instruction is all working with texts and translating and repeating and doing audiolingual method without a whole lot of communicative activities, right? And then, or maybe there are communicative activities, but what students are being tested on is how well they translate, right? Or how well they write. With that in mind, students are not necessarily going to be paying attention to how well they can express themselves orally or how well they communicate, but okay, well, what do I need to say? What do I need to learn? How well do I need to teach myself how to write in order to be able to pass the test, in order to get a good grade? So this is what.
That's what it means. Yeah, that's true.
It's all about evangelism. Yeah, Laura? Well, he also writes, this is not where it ends, he also describes effective assessments as something that's multidimensional. And he says, or he defines it in terms of its ability to capture various dimensions of literacy and the content of language use. Now, in terms of literacy, contents of language use, those are all the things that we covered during our reading groups. I am not going to go there. Linking linguistic form and meaning, draws on students' knowledge, integrates various linguistic modalities, and it is actually coherent and consistent with the instruction, so that it naturally sort of flows out of it. If you are interested in discussing these bullet points, I can send you the article, or we can talk about it after the workshop, or better, you can just come to our discussion group, and this is literally all that we talk about. But, okay, so effective assessment, is there anything else? Oh yeah, assessment of multiliteracies, okay. Perfect. In terms of the multiliteracies framework, I'm going to lean heavily on Bainey here. what are multiliteracies in your own understanding?
Oh my God. Multiliteracies.
You're next.
Oh shit. Multiliteracies.
I can't ask him.
God, what's it again? I'm going to be obsessed. This is like summative assessment of what I know about what we did on Monday, last Monday.
You have 30 seconds.
Really, thank you. And that really helps.
We are recording it too.
Right. Yes, you feel free to edit this part out. Okay, so
Bathroom break.
multiliteracies are different ways in which language comes across, which could be like texts on a phone is an example of a literacy, and or anything that has to do with social media is a type of literacy where that would not be assessed in the past or used, but now that that students use that a lot, we can focus on that as well. And then you have the more traditional literacies, like texts or written text or newspapers, articles, or any medium by which language is conveyed. Is what my submission is.
Okay, there's a lot in there to unpack. Would you like to add to it, or are you? That's perfect.
Thank you.
Okay. I think, yeah. Long story short, multiliteracies is a framework in which we teach language. The framework relies on the central notion of meaning design, right? Which is making connections between the form and the meaning, which is something that we're all familiar with. That is what we do on an everyday basis. Now, these connections can be made either actively or passively, right? So, actively would be if we write, and if we talk. Passively is when we read or if we listen. And they could be made based on various texts. Now, texts are not just literally, like you said, it could be pictorial, they could be semiotic, they could be music, it could be art. And those are all sort of the constitute the basis on which we can use in order to engage in this constructive, effective form meaning connection and design practices. That was my summary of it. Now, so how do we then take this framework and how do we tie it together with assessment? One way to bridge these two seemingly disparate worlds would be through the World Readiness Standards, and they're that talk about three different modes of communication: interpersonal, presentational, and interpretive. And I sort of already gave you examples of kinds of assessments that could be conducted within these three different modes. This is something that you are 100% sure familiar with. You may not be familiar with the classification, but then again, that's just the classification. I'll give you a second to take a look at it. That's pretty straightforward.
Usually, I do the first two. The third one is the one I do.
Yeah, third one is something that is not a very intuitive thing to do in lower level language classes.
It takes it a step further, almost, right? Like deeper.
It requires certain kind of cultural understanding, which may or may not be available to students at the beginner level, depending on how we choose to structure the curriculum, right? Usually at intermediate advanced level, students are able to draw these comparatives and make these connections or make these comparisons between their own culture and target culture they're learning. But yes, this would be an example right there.
will expand, not to conclude all of the deadlines.
So, so for instance, in the case of the interpersonal mode of communication, right, you have you have the assessment here is the students will describe what they have for lunch and compare it to what's eaten for lunch by the peers in the target culture, right? So this is what you want them to be able to do. This kind of ability is what you will be assessing. Now, how do you want to assess them? By
Maybe
what activities? By
have-
making them do what?
Have them research at home what lunch typically is in the target culture for people there.
Mm-hmm, okay.
And then, so they have that knowledge now.
Okay.
And then in the classroom, they can, like one half of the class for homework would research that, and the other half just thinks about what they typically have for lunch, and then those two are paired, and then they compare notes.
And they compare notes, so they then discuss with one
Right.
another. Okay, so this would be sort of a mix of interpersonal and presentational, since each group or each
That's
person
true.
would then
Okay,
be
that's true.
presenting
Yeah.
their knowledge,
Oh,
right?
yeah. I
But it's
can
still
think of that.
oral, and it's still
Right.
it's still them presenting. Mm-hmm.
And among each other, not one to the group, but one-on-one, for instance.
Okay,
which
one-on-one,
would make
sure.
it less presentational.
Okay. What about presentations? Students will present to their class or a group of peers what's eaten for lunch in target culture. How could this be? What kind of activity would encapsulate that is accessible?
Well, they had the discussions,
Mm-hmm.
and they can make a summary of they like through interviews.
Interviews, okay.
So through interviews, they're gonna ask
Video, audio,
their
written?
classmates.
Video, audio interviews, written interviews,
No, oral interviews.
oral interviews.
Oral interviews.
Will they record?
In class.
It's just a question. Those questions are directed at or aimed at making you consider various different activity types.
I have never done it. I do it in oral interviews,
Okay.
which they have to annotate the results of whatever they get from the classmates, and then they have to make a summary and present it to the class. I do it more through an exercise that I call gossip, and instead of presenting to the whole class, I have them first in a small group. They ask questions, they interview each other, they get responses from that small group, and they have to go to another group, to work with different people, and tell them what they found out from that first group that they worked in. So that's why it's usually oral.
But it's usually oral. Can we think of anything that's written
Um,
that is also formative?
I actually combined the first one and the second one, so the result of the first interpersonal communication mode is being presented.
Sure.
But instead of doing the research, I asked them to do, I don't know if we can call this interview, so I asked them to text 3 of my chosen friends back home in Indonesia questions about traveling, because my students love traveling, and then the other 3 also. So
Okay.
they also learn how to text back in Indonesia. And it's a 1-week assignment, and then at the deadline I have to present what they cut.
Okay. Which brings us to a pretty important realization that these are not clear cut.
Right.
They can mix. They're interchangeable. Well, I don't want to say they're interchangeable, but they merge.
They're
There's
mixable.
there's no there doesn't still need to be a clear distinction between those, right? We can have activities that incorporate all 3 of them. For instance, in case of interpersonal, they can, let's say, create a video, right, which then presents what it is that is eaten in their own culture, and this can be done across all levels, I think, of instruction. what's in their own culture versus the target culture, then that video could be presented in front of the class using the presentation mode, where they are essentially, the video is playing in the background, they're telling the students or their colleagues and peers what it is that is playing. And then later on, this could then, or video could be on pause, and you can then have, as an instructor, as a facilitator, you can then ask your students to think of a dish that is similar, it's maybe 100% different from what they currently see on the screen, and investigate how it could be prepared. And then that could lead to yet another activity and so on and so forth. Could these things that I just mentioned be used as formative assessment?
It's formative, not summative.
For formative. Or summative.
So I always remember one that I did, but it was a summative assessment, which was one of the second, like let's say, have two presentations. It was the last presentation. And they would have to go to neighborhoods where there was a group of big businesses or people that's called Portuguese, which are not that many in New York, and they would have to try to see if they could see the language, the Portuguese language, written in signs or these different businesses, and to try to interview people on the target language.
Okay.
And so I think that they would present that to the class. That was something.
And why did you do that? Why did you ask them to?
Because I wanted them to see how Portuguese was actually used in
Okay, so the objective would be to have your students exposed to spoken Portuguese that is colloquial, right? In a unstructured setting where anything could really happen. Right? The task that is used to accomplish that objective is to go out where Portuguese is spoken. You can recognize it by the signs around you, and then you start talking to people, right? And then you assess it by the quality of the dialogue. And this would fit into which mode of communication? Would it be interpersonal, presentational, interpretive? Presentational.
Because it was reported, they did videos.
So this would be a kind of formative assessment that can take place outside of the classroom, right? You're thinking.
Well, yeah, I'm thinking of so many things because I get all these ideas suddenly.
That's a good thing.
And now I will
Write them
ask
down.
you, what would you do? So right now we're talking about bicycling. That is a huge cultural thing. Of course, everybody
In Holland?
has two bicycles and everybody bicycles, and it's a big thing. Right, everywhere. Right. So we're talking about bicycling. And one thing that came up at the end of the class, one student asked, "How come nobody wears a helmet?" And now I thought maybe you can do something with that, with a bicycle helmet. Like, that's a cultural thing, nobody wears a helmet, it's true, right? But of course it's dangerous. So what would be a good activity that I can have them do together about that?
I have it.
What do you think?
I have an opinion. This is a question to me or is it a question
Yeah, to the
open
group.
everyone?
What would you do? I suddenly think of that, but then what would be a good way to go about that?
So basically to persuade them to wear a helmet.
No. Well, you could do that. That could be one
To keep it
activity.
within the framework of this
Oh,
workshop.
but that's what I mean. Yeah.
So
what-
you
what-
want to turn this. You want this to be a form of formative assessment.
So this is the lunch, right? Your example of lunch,
Sure.
but now it's a bicycle helmet.
Okay,
It's
this
the
is
same.
Perfect.
the
Perfect
same.
question. Thank you. I do have ideas, but I will.
So in those three modes of communication, right? Presentational, I can see how I could do that. I could have them. And what I could do is have people who take the view. Yes, it is great not to have a helmet, even though they don't think so, but, and then they could present their arguments for both, that would be presentational, right?
That would be,
Or would it be interpersonal?
that would be presentational. If you are, so one group is making
So what
presentation.
one group says, it's great to, of course you have to have a bicycle helmet because so-and-so, and the other says, well, why would you, because so-and-so, arguments.
Perfect.
So it's more like a debate.
Okay, well, a debate,
That would be
was going to be
presentational?
my idea. That was going to be my idea, would be interpersonal, I think.
That's
So a debate
interpersonal.
would be interpersonal. If you have a group that, I mean, you can combine, one can lead to the other, right? You can have,
Right.
you can have them grouped into groups, where one group does pro, the other one does
Right.
con, right? And they present their arguments. Then the two groups, I don't know, maybe they switch and they start debating which one is actually better, using or staying within the interpersonal mode of communication. Interpretive. You do realize that in the United States, even though you are required to wear a helmet while you're riding a motorbike, you don't do that.
In some states.
Mostly. Like people who drive motorbikes don't usually wear helmets, right?
In
Why?
those states, like in Connecticut and New
Okay,
Hampshire.
right, sure.
But not in
those
other states. I've
so-
never seen that. Or you're trying, or you're
So-
advocating for it now.
No, I'm not. I'm just saying that, okay, how do these people here in the United States who don't wear helmets on motorbikes do this for the same reasons why the people in the Netherlands don't wear helmets on bicycles?
I like it.
This would be an interpretive mode right there.
I like it. Yeah.
I like this topic. In Indonesia, we don't understand what's helmet.
You also don't have helmets.
No,
No.
we do have, but we feel like we're being forced to wear it.
Okay. Should we move on? I'm sorry, yes.
Nice, thank you.
I interrupted you, I feel like. Okay, so, bringing this up, and you're welcome to open up your computers and go to goformative.com. Bringing this up because of a couple remarks that you made throughout our discussion so far. One of it being that it seems to be, actually there's two main sort of remarks that I caught. One being that it is difficult to pay attention to everybody while doing formative assessments, as in to pay attention to all of your students, because when they're talking, you can only hear this many students at the same time. When they're doing their work, you can only see this many things at the same time. This platform solves that issue. Another remark that I heard was that it is not always most intuitive to on how to conduct formative assessment that is not oral. So to do written assessment that is based on that doesn't just assess spoken abilities, but that could also tell you as an instructor about the reading abilities, the writing abilities, and so on and so forth. This platform addresses that as well. Okay, if you are there already, the link is right here, goformative.com. I'm going to click on the link here too. Let's see if it takes me where it's supposed to. There we go. Okay. So you should see, oh my lord, you should see something like this. Let's go ahead and sign up. And of course, you will be a teacher. And luckily, you can sign in with Google, which would be our line mail accounts. So I'm gonna choose my username, my Columbia username and password. In fact, as you guys are going through this registration process, I'm going to take a few steps back since I already got a account. I'm just going to go ahead and log in.
Should we enter the school too or not? Or doesn't
Yes, it will bug you about it at some point sooner or
Okay.
later, so I'll just recommend entering it. Once you get to this screen, let me know. Of course, at some point during the onboarding process, you will be prompted to watch like a tutorial video. I will do the tutorial for you, so you don't have to watch it now. It will.
It's not on the list? Columbia University on the list? The school at
The
Columbia
school at
University.
Columbia University.
But then there's
Yeah, it's
Columbia
for the
in
school.
Texas.
You can just add Columbia University. Just
Okay.
type it in.
No, it goes to the school. Does it matter?
Nah.
I'm not with the school. My school isn't listed. Oh, there we go.
Also, this is something that can always be changed. As you are working here, let's go.
Someone's called me Mrs. Johnson. Oh, we have to include it.
Why are you sending me cancel?
And it says at grade levels?
If you can skip out of it or out of some of it,
I
then
don't
that's.
think we
that's
have to.
If you have, if they.
Oh, no, stands are optional. Oh, no, it says it's required. Education, subject, German, other. It will be a formative superhero in minutes.
So make sure that, just let me know when you're here. When you've, clicked out of the tutorials and all else.
Should we upload or explore? Yeah.
Okay.
Can't go further.
Let's just go to
Explore library.
upload and create.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, and it should take you to
Click to add new content.
and this is the tutorial that I mentioned.
Oops.
Okay, so from the screen that you see where it says click to add new content, in the
Right.
upper left-hand corner it should say untitled formative and should be an arrow next to it pointing to the left.
I got it, yeah.
Click on that arrow.
So we're here, right?
Yep. So we are here. Okay. Yours should say untitled formative. I have already titled mine. Mine is titled test. True to its name since we are talking about assessments. Now you should see something like this.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what happens when you hit the plus sign is you will see that there are 3 different sort of things you can add to it. Keep in mind that we are building a formative assessment here. So, I'm going to start from the bottom. You can add your own content, which allows you to upload a presentation or a PDF file. Okay, now that's great. Let's go to the desktop here. I have a beautiful text about German breakfast, so I'm just going to go ahead and open it. And they're processing the file. They will convert it to their own format, which will then become available as part of your assignment. Okay? This is something that I don't find particularly enlightening or all that much fun. But if you are so inclined, you can experiment with it on your own at home. I'm going to go ahead and remove this item for now. That's what it is. Okay, perfect. And instead, I wanted to draw your attention to this other 2 categories. There's add content and add a question. The way to look at it is to start with add content. And this is, the way to look at this category is as your prompt for the questions. This could be an image. This could be a video. This could be text. This could be whatever you want your students to use as input. Using a video allows you to use a video as an authentic source of input.
Nice.
Let's see here. I'm gonna go on to the
Can we do work from this entire formative?
Sorry?
That's what we're.
Yeah, so you hit the plus sign, and this is where you get to, yeah. YouTube. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and look for, let's say, German breakfast, and it should, this is pretty good, how to eat breakfast like a bed lifestyle in German.
There's no such.
You have to get it from YouTube.
Yes,
Because
so-
sometimes I download the YouTube and I have it already on my
That would be
file.
fine.
Well, so if you look here, it says paste the YouTube video URL or something like, so it only works with URLs. It
Right.
doesn't work with locally saved files.
I see.
Mhm. Which is why I went to YouTube to retrieve a link, which is, where is it, right
Nice.
here. Copy it and then stick it in here. And then update. Okay, so now we have our little video here. And this will be a source of authentic language, authentic input. Now, with this video, I'm going to go ahead and move over to add a question. So hit the plus sign beneath, and you will be brought to yet another of the same box where, having given them a prompt, now we want to check or to use that prompt to assess a certain, I don't know, pedagogical objective, right? Which could be done either by an essay or multiple choice question or multiple selection and so on and so forth.
Can I ask something
Yeah.
more about not so this is free, I saw, unless you
some
can
of
get
it
some
is-
things you have to pay for. Now, suppose you would pay for it as an instructor, but and the students don't. Can they still
Yes.
see whatever you do, even though they don't pay?
Yes.
They
I
do.
will get there.
Okay.
So,
And also,
yes.
can this be uploaded onto Canvas?
Yes, and I will get there too.
All right.
We do have, but you guys probably have to stay for extra 10 minutes.
Yeah, I can. I would like to see that.
Okay. So let's say an essay question will effectively enter an essay box for your students to fill in. Multiple choice, you have to select one correct answer. Multiple selection, you select all correct answers. What I really did here is show your work, which if you click, it opens up a canvas, it opens up a blank whiteboard. So, draw, on top I'm going to input a question or task, draw your favorite breakfast item. Or actually, better yet, select the items that are common for German and American breakfast. Okay, and here I'm going to go ahead and insert a picture.
Super cool.
Where students will then be able to circle things like
Oh, that's so cool.
bacon or whatever it is that they find similar between the two. And this is, this could be done with all sorts of things. And I'm using food because
Right,
it's
oh,
free
that
to
is
the
really
category.
fun and actually usable.
Then select standard set. Allows you to, like if you are in public schooling,
Right.
it allows you to adjust it for different standards. That's something you guys will have to worry about. So this would be a first question. You can decide how much you want this to be worth. So let's say I want this to be worth 10 points. And this is pretty much it. Show your work, question number 1. Okay? And we can, move on to create more questions. Multiple choice, or let's say input or insert an image here. we'll upload a file. Let's do Frühstück. And this is an example of German breakfast. Below, so you see how it basically builds these questions, or builds these assessments from top to bottom. This is one sheet. So I just put in this picture here. I'm going to open up and ask them multiple selection question where mark what sequence items do you see here, right? Let's give me first the target language, and let's say A would be what we can list. This would be on. Let's say what else is here?
Käse.
Käse. And then we can add more questions if we want to. If we allow partial credit, if they mark one but not all of them, they will still get some credit for it. And so on and so forth. And this is how we essentially put these together. Now, let's see questions. So once we're done, or at least we think we're done with this, we can go ahead and preview to see what it looks like, and this is what our students see it as. Now, in the top, you will see that this is how they will see it on their phones. On the iPad, it will look like this, and on the computer, it will look like this.
Pretty cool.
Okay, so.
Okay, so now we do. So they see that.
So so this is what you build as an instructor, and this is how it appears to them. And then what we do, so this is the first step, we edit it, then we go ahead and assign it. Now we can assign it to guest students, but it's always best to just add a class. I'm gonna go ahead and do Teach Tech will be our class here, and then T2 will be abbreviation. You can select the color. Ours will be purple, and then boom, create a class. Okay. Now, in the settings, in the optional settings, the first two are not available for the free version, but here is something really cool. So for return scores, we can have them see instantly whether they're correct or not. We can allow them to see the results after they've submitted their assessments, or just they don't need to, we choose to not show them the scores at all. Same with the feedback. So if we want to, we can allow them the feedback or not. Okay. We can go ahead and close this, go back to select classes, Teach Tech, and then I'm going to hit assign.
So I was.
Oh boy, I don't know where you are. Okay. How did you get here? Okay, here we go.
So I have to create a class.
Yeah, it would take some 2 seconds. Or you can just follow this. So I'm going to hit assign.
So that's what they see,
Uh-huh.
and that's what they do.
Uh-huh.
Got it.
Uh-huh.
But okay.
So why don't you
how
guys go
join?
to... Okay, so...
But how would they know if the entire that is mine? That I don't understand. You know, so they go to goformative.com, they log in. But how does the system recognize that these are my students and not somebody else's students?
Well, you can share this directly. with
Okay.
them.
There's a link.
There's a link. There's a Google Classroom, but we don't use Google Classroom at Columbia. Or there's an embed code, which is what
And that
we
you can
use
put on campus.
to throw it into campus.
Perfect.
So again, how do I create this?
So, and class name,
Like, what you use for translation?
anything that's short.
Sure.
Well, we're out of time. Intermediate Portuguese language for Spanish speakers in the spring 2019 semester at Columbia University.
Yes.
That's good. Uh-huh. Select a color. Whatever. Blue is great. Create class.
This is really pretty cool.
So, and we can, before, okay, so we minimize this. Now, see, I don't have anyone here in the
Right.
class, but what you can do is, here is next step is view responses. Once I have people here, these responses will become visible, and they will become visible in real time. So in other words, students will have access to these formative assessments that you produced, and you will be able to monitor what they do in real time from your own computer, from your own device.
Wow.
If you want to, then you
That's
can.
a fun thing to play around with.
You can export. Export results are only available.
Right. I wonder how much it costs to be to subscribe to it, because when you subscribe to the features that you cannot have now, right? But you say that once you subscribe to students, although they're not subscribers, can see those features and work with that because they're recipients and not the author.
Yeah, it's back in the day, you used to be able to export it as a spreadsheet for free. Now it's a paid feature.
Might not need it, but just you know.
cost?
I don't know. Let's see.
Because we could pay with our.
If
Probably.
I'm sure you can,
Tracker,
yeah.
enter quick.
If it
let's
is
see.
at all,
Tracker library by premium.
you might not even need it.
Choose annual, let's say 25. Choose start my 30-day trial. So if you just want to do it for a month, use.
It doesn't say how much it is.
Free.
Choose for annual per second.
So this is per month.
Right, that's hefty. We don't need all those features, so.
And then annual, you save quarters, so $145 a year.
Right. Well, once you start using it and love it, then you might decide to do that.
There's an activity here. We don't have the time for it. I will still give it out to you because it gives you ideas for formative
please.
assessments, and this is something that you can successfully translate into the using this platform here. Let me just finish this thing right here. So this was the activity for today. Let me start playing once. Okay, next week we are not meeting next week. I will be at a conference.
Right.
I'm not
Very
here.
good. I can't. I'm very busy next Thursday, so that's perfect.
Perfect. There is a next meet. So our next meeting for the workshop is on 28th
Okay.
of February. There is a discussion group on Monday.
Yeah.
This Monday,
That
this
I
upcoming
know.
Monday. 2:30 to 3:30 p.m. It will be about various forms of text that could be used within the Multiliteracies framework in curriculum
Reading
design.
group, got that. And then, not on the 18th, but not 21st, but the 28th.
So the discussion group is not a workshop. Workshop is not. A
I have,
discussion group.
yeah,
There's two things. And then there's a reading for it, chapter 1, chapter 2. If you've done it, you've done it. If not, that's okay. And that's for Monday. Yeah. And they're short chapters, like 40 pages total.
He said, you're not joking. Were you joking right now?
They're short. 40 pages for 2 chapters? Or is it 40 pages?
I thought you were kidding. That's why I was laughing.
Because
And
this
that's why
was
it's
assigned
short.
like a month ago. I mean, not assigned, but like I
Yeah.
posted a month ago, so.
Right, but it's not short.
Okay.
It's long.
Long,
But you have a long, but you have a
tedious,
long.
and exhausting.
Yeah.
Of course,
long time.
you don't have all those compositions to correct, name, not
I
quizzes,
I don't. But it's, this is
And
the
you have many
same.
students. I have 22.
And I have to attend 3 classes too.
For a discussion group, you need something to discuss those texts.
Yeah,
I know.
Where there's like for a month you.
This
you
is
think
totally
you-
true, but you did say last time for next time we don't have to read anything.
Well, if
You
you've read
said
it
that.
already, then you don't.
Oh,
It's the
that's
same,
what you
it's the same
meant.
stuff.
Right,
There's
yes, I
nothing
did.
new.
Oh, okay.
I want to get to that
Happy
point.
Valentine's.
You too.
Yes.
And this was
No,
actually
we-
great, thank you.
Sure.
It really
The
was
chocolates. You should bring the chocolates. And
The chocolates.
and
And the roses. Any other ridiculous wishes?